Welcome to the Autism Advocate Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Hales. If you're looking for tips on how to advocate for and understand your autistic child in a more meaningful way, you've come to the right place, and we're so happy to have you join us. Welcome back. Our deep dive today, I will be breaking down for you some of the acronyms that are used within IEP meetings. And already, I've thrown an acronym out for you. Now, before I get started, do you know how much I get paid to do this? $0. If you are so inclined, it's the holiday season. I really want to be able to continue bringing parents and families this information. I do have an autism affirming shop. You can check it out at alexandthedrummer.square.site. Stickers, keychains, my children's illustrated books soon, Alex and the Drummer and Alex and the Muffin Man. Every purchase helps me continue forward. Continuing on, IEP, Individualized Educational Program. Now, what's so fantastic about, hold on, I'm typing something. What's so fantastic about an individualized education program is that it's individual. So you don't need to have it be like everyone else's. That's the exact function of it. So if someone says, we don't do that because it's something that hasn't been done before, it doesn't need to have been done before for it to be approved or for it to be appropriate for somebody to do. It's a plan or program developed to ensure that a child with an identified disability who is attending an elementary, secondary educational institution receives specialized instruction and related services. And it is a legal document, meaning that it is a contract established between you as one party and the school and your child as the other party, that they will uphold everything that is within the IEP. So I could go deeper into the IEP itself, but again, I want to focus on acronyms today. Another acronym that a lot of people don't know is FBA. FBA. If you have a child that has behavioral struggles, this may be a term that's more familiar to you. I know it is in our family. And FBA stands for Functional Behavioral Assessment. Again, Functional Behavioral Assessment. It's a process schools use to figure out what's causing challenging behavior. So an FBA leads to a plan with strategies to improve the behavior, and that's a different acronym that it leads to. But again, an FBA is conducted by the school's team, which would include data being specifically collected by the teacher, by anyone else who interacts with the student, whether it's a paraprofessional or an aide, whether it's a pathologist, speech pathologist, occupational therapist within the school. Your input as parent is also, please make sure that that is being counted toward the functional behavioral assessment. It may include some district behavioral assessment providers as well. If they happen to have, for example, at the district level, somebody who has more expertise in the area, a psychologist of some kind, they may come in and observe as well. So in the functional behavioral assessment, you're gathering data for the purposes of creating what's called a BIP or a BIP. BIP or BIP. And that stands for Behavioral Intervention Plan. Behavioral Intervention Plan. So again, the functional behavioral assessment is you go to a meeting that has been called, or you have called an IEP meeting to sort of declare, we would have all come to the agreement that a functional behavioral assessment, or FBA, should be done on behalf of my child or the child. This functional behavioral assessment will be conducted by these people. Make sure you get a date as far as when that functional behavioral assessment should be completed. At the conclusion of that functional behavioral assessment, the data that has been gathered revolving around those problematic or challenging behaviors will then be used to create a BIP or a behavior intervention plan. So, for example, the steps of a functional behavioral assessment. The team gathers information and uses it to create a plan to improve behavior. So, this team takes steps like one, defining the challenging behavior. What is the behavior? Has it been defined yet? And if not, then you can't really address it. Gather and analyze information. So, who, what, when, where, why, how, right? So, who was involved at what time of day? What was the duration, intensity? What escalated the situation? What was the sensory surrounding? Was it really bright? Had they just come in from recess? Was it during a transition time? That's when you can start finding out, number 3, the reason for the behavior. Once you start finding patterns, and you know what? It always seems to be when their clothing is wet. That's my kid. It seems to be right after lunch. It seems to be when they are trying to interact with this specific person. Find the reason for the behavior. And then number 4, make a plan. Okay? Now, the behavior intervention plan, which all of this data leads to, or the BIP, is that they aim to prevent behavior that gets in the way of learning, that impedes their ability to have a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. There's another one I'll address in just a second. The Behavior Intervention Plan, or BIP, or BIP, is a formal written plan that teaches and rewards good behavior. So in other words, for those children who within their IEP, they have their accommodations, saying that it's helpful for, the student is entitled to this much extra testing time. They require flexible seating. Whatever it is not enough to help them with their behavior. And because of that, they need an additional section called a behavior intervention plan. To obtain that behavior intervention plan, to create it as a team, you gather the data. That process of gathering data is the functional behavioral assessment, or FBA. Behavior intervention plan can be a single page or many pages, and it has 3 key parts. It lists the problematic behavior. It is hitting, it is spitting, it is undressing, it is aggressive language, physical aggression, but in what form? Kicking, it is eloping, etc. Secondly, it describes what's happening. So again, the environment, where, when does this take place? What does it look like? What is the duration? And lastly, it puts in place strategies or supports to help. In other words, maybe they have an issue with people entering their physical space. Part of their behavior intervention plan could outline that the student requires, wherever possible, 3 feet of space around them at all times. They need a bubble, right? Now, it can't always be applied, of course, but if 97% of the time that everyone around them is aware of their behavior intervention plan, as they should be within their environment, and they have that space, that student will be able to function more. They will be choosing their behavior instead of feeling stressed to the point where they are reacting and just trying to survive the sensory scenario. Just like an IEP, because kids change over time, data should be recorded on how the child is progressing within that behavior intervention plan. Are things being effective or not? Children can outgrow things within their behavior intervention plan, and sometimes they need to have another functional behavioral assessment to decide what else are we going to have in this behavior intervention plan. So the last thing that I wanted to not the last thing. One of the other acronyms that you should know about is IDEA. IDEA. IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Just a little bit of interesting history about it. From 1975 to 1990, it was actually called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. Interesting. I didn't know that part. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, it looks like the word idea. if you were confused. So this is national, so this is federal information. It's a whole lot of laws that support you as the parent that describe things that your child is entitled to within the educational system as someone who has disabilities within, like I said, the educational system. There's a lot in there. So I'm not going to dive deep into what IDEA is. Just know that it is a fantastic resource for you to get more familiar with. It is something that when you go to, for example, within the .gov area of IDEA, there's a whole thing that lists the programs involved, contacts, IDEA by state, because each state has its own subset of laws and different ways that they demand that things be performed and recorded, etc., on behalf of your child. IDEA. So when people reference IDEA, that's what they're talking about. Now, FAPE, free and appropriate public education. This is one that is so important because it is something that you can use constantly, and it is the drive for everything that you are trying to get for your child. Now, beneath the umbrella of FAPE, FAPE, or free and appropriate public education, with underneath that umbrella is so many things that are very individual for the child, right? So one child who is in a wheelchair, for them to have FAPE or free and appropriate public education, they would require ramps throughout the entire school or elevators for them to access all their educational learning areas, right? That is not required, for example, for my child who is autistic. He does not require ramps for free and appropriate public education. So it's based on the individual's needs within the public education system. So another thing to clarify is that to have the rights for a free and appropriate public education for students with disabilities, since the entire name, it has to be publicly funded, meaning it's federal dollars that are at work here, that are being used for this child's education. So for example, if you decide personally as a family, this public education is not working for us, it's not working for my child, and for our personal reasons, we are going to leave the public education system and go private and use our private funds, you have now forfeited their rights to public education law. Now, that doesn't mean that's the wrong choice. I'm not saying that. But sometimes people get confused about when they go to a private school that they should have the same rights at a private school. You are now at a private institution, so they are not responsible for providing a free and appropriate public education to your child. Again, it's something that an institution that receives federal financial assistance. So, nice, big, fantastic quote. Section 504 provides that no otherwise qualified individual with a disability in the United States shall solely by reason of her or his disability be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Now, just taking that, and again, that is federal, think about what that could mean when it comes to your child and how they can be included, how they need to be included, have the right to be included. So shall solely by reason of her or his disability. So if the only reason they are unable to participate, for example, in a soccer, after school soccer league that is federally funded, if the only reason is because they are autistic, then that's not legally okay. According to this statement, shall solely by reason of her or his disability be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination that would be considered discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So that includes, like I said, federally funded after school programs, if they're school funded clubs, school funded, anything that involves federal funds, which is anything school funded. Let's see, what else did I want to make sure? I think those were all. So let me recap real quick. IEP, Individualized Educational Program. FAPE, Free and Appropriate Public Education. IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act. Functional Behavioral Assessment, or FBA. And number 5, BIP, BIP, or Behavior Intervention Plan. 5 big acronyms for you that you are probably going to come into contact with. And if you are not already familiar with free and appropriate education, or with IDEA, there are, like I talked about in the last podcast, a lot of really fantastic things that break down what the laws are, how you could use those laws, how the laws are designed to make sure your child has access to an appropriate education, which, because every child is different, just because your child has disabilities doesn't mean that they should have less access, less inclusion, interaction with that education. Isn't that awesome? Now, again, I will say that a lot of people who tell you otherwise, especially if they're already involved in the educational system, aren't necessarily malicious. Often they're not trying to mislead you. A lot of times they have been told by people above them that this is how it's done. So when you bring forth the law, it's something that they cannot argue with. When they do not get back to you, you go higher and higher until they do. That was a bit of a short deep dive, but I thought it was really important to get those acronyms to you. I think I'm going to dive deep within FAPE, or Free and Appropriate Public Education, and IDEA next time. We'll see. Because it is a doozy. I hope that was helpful. I hope next time that word pops up, and again, in any IEP meeting, you have the right to very politely interrupt and say, I'm sorry, what was that acronym that you just said? Or, sorry to interrupt you. I don't know what IDEA means. Could you help me understand that? You have the right to understand all the proceedings within an IEP meeting. Again, that is your legal right. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, I don't know about enjoyed. I hope it was informative and helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Want to submit a question? Email us at theautismadvocatepodcast@gmail.com. Follow our social media outlets and check out our shop featuring my Autism Acceptance, Children's Illustrated books, and other fun autism acceptance items. Don't forget, I'm rooting for you, and we'll see you next time.